In today's video, we are diving into something game-changing. We are going to build an AI sales agent from the ground up. A fully functional agent designed to pre-screen cold calls and qualify leads for your business. By the end of this video, you will have a blueprint to create your very own AI sales agent. Now, in previous videos, I have covered batch calling and cold calling, but I didn't do justice in diving into the behind the scenes on how to create one from the ground up. That changes today. Get ready for an extensive breakdown. You won't want to miss any part of this process. For those new here, I'm Jonas Massey, founder of Esplanade AI. We help businesses streamline their sales process using AI agents. So in today's video, this is what we'll be covering. First, we'll use the Vapi platform to create our assistant framework. Then we'll integrate this with make.com to manage the logic flow and allow our agent to work through our lead list. This brings us to our database, which we'll be using Airtable to manage and store all these leads. And finally, we'll build two OpenAI assistants that will help analyze our transcripts and determine the outcome of each call and also capture any users' emails. All right, strap in because this will be a longer one, but by the end of this video, you'll have everything you need to build your own. Let's get started. We'll begin with our Vapi assistant. Now, for this, we need to decide the overall objective of our assistant and as a result, the conversation flow. Considering this agent is making cold calls, we want the conversation to be quick and punchy. This is because we don't want to be getting hung up on all the time. So let's start with creating our assistants. We can name it whatever we want. I'm gonna name it Talk AI Outbound 2. I've done a few of these outbound campaigns and I'm gonna put in a script that's worked well for us. So we'll create from a blank template and we'll hit create assistant. Now I've got this script that I'll be using here. So I'll quickly run through it and I'll leave this script in the description so you guys can copy and edit as you need. But to explain it quite briefly, we have our system prompt. You're an outbound sales agent tasked with contacting cold leads. You should seek to understand their needs throughout the natural course of the conversation. Ultimately, you should seek to uncover the following information. Now, these are going to be our questions we are going to be asking these leads. So how do they handle cold leads? What's your biggest challenge? And would automating this with AI be something they'd try? Down here, we give it an example conversation flow. This will help better guide our assistant on what it should be asking and when. This is Sam from Talk AI. Quick question, have you ever received a cold call by an AI? As an AI agent myself, blah, 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 it runs through those questions. At the bottom, we're gonna specify, keep your responses concise and short. Do not deviate outside the domain of our scope of questions. If you are asked a question unrelated, you will say, my job is to get these questions answered. I'm not authorized to answer anything unrelated. This mitigates the chances of deviating out of the script, although our temperature will determine a lot of that. But this sort of helps solidify that it won't deviate outside our task. So there's a quick explanation of our system prompt within Vapi, the backbone of how this assistant will be working. The next order of business is to decide on the LLM to use. Now, I've tested pretty much everything, and particularly with these assistants that are more conversational, we are looking for low latency models. Now, Grok actually is the lowest latency model. You can see here the latency is about 300 milliseconds. However, my experience with Grok is it's not so conversational. So the output of the text and therefore the output of the speech is not exactly what I want it to be. So in this case, I'm gonna be using Anthropic and we'll use Claude 3.5 Sonnet. It's been good to me. From my tests, it's probably the best. So we'll use that. I'm going to specify a first message. Now you'll see the latency increased with Anthropic Claude to 500 milliseconds instead of 300. So to sort of break up the silence at the start of the conversation, we'll have just a hello message. So it'll call up hello. User will say hello, and then it'll run through the script. A temperature we're going to use to not deviate outside too much of this script, we're going to use 0.4. Now, I played around with different temperatures, and this, for this specific application, is probably the best. I'm also going to set the max tokens to 125, just so if it does go on a tangent, it's not going on a long monologue, and therefore using up valuable minutes. But that's pretty much it for the front end of this model. There's not too much else we're going to change in terms of the system prompt or the first message or anything else like that. Now, before we move on, considering I'm in Australia, it's important to note that we're inside the scope of the law. AI calls are a bit ambiguous when it comes to legislation. However, because we are calling other businesses, this is a B2B communication, and therefore we sort of fall under the telemarketing laws. They state that you must identify yourself, so your name and the company you're calling from, and the purpose of your call. And we pretty much do this in this script, so we're all good to go there. Next, we'll head into transcriber. We're going to use DeepGram as probably the best provider for transcriptions. The model we're going to use is phone call Nova 2. This keeps things nice and concise within the phone call and structures it perfectly. Now, the fun part, choosing the voice of our AI assistant. Now, I'm in Australia, and if you receive a cold call by a foreign accent, our pickup rate or answer rate is going to be significantly decreased. So essentially what I want here, and this will be specific to your location, I want an Australian accent and I want a realistic sounding one. The best I can do here is a clone of my voice. Check out that video if you haven't already. So for this particular assistant, I'm going to use a clone of my voice. It's an 11 Labs clone, and I'll just select it here, AI Journalist Professional. The model I'm going to be using is Turbo V2. Now with Turbo V2.5 with 11 Labs, I've noticed pronunciation is a bit temperamental. Sometimes it'll pronounce words good, sometimes it won't, which gives away the fact that it's an AI quite quickly if it does do that. And 11 Turbo V2 doesn't really do that, hence why I'll be using that. Now down to additional configuration, we'll enable background sounds. The reason for this is mainly due to latency. Because an AI agent at this point in time is quite slow to respond. As we saw above, it was 850 milliseconds. So a second to respond to the user. Enabling background ambient sound breaks the silence a bit, and it sounds great in my opinion. So we'll set that to default, we'll leave it as is. As to the further options down here, if you're using a clone voice, a nice settings configuration here is 0.4 for stability and clarity 0.7. I've messed around with all these settings and that's probably the best configuration. We don't have to mess with style exaggeration and latency. That's good to go in terms of the voice. Now, next thing we'll do is head over to the advanced tab, and there's not much we have to do here just yet. All I'm gonna do is change the maximum duration of the call to about 5 minutes. Now, because we've scraped leads off the web, we want to ensure that we're not being placed in waiting queues and then staying on the call for like 10 minutes, 20 minutes. That'll chew up our minutes pretty quick and eventually cost a fair bit of money. So we'll set that to 300 seconds, that'll be fine. Now, under messaging, this will be important soon, but we'll come back to this. This is where essentially we send some data over to our server. So it'll be our make scenario, including the end of call report, which will contain our transcript, but we'll come back to that when we're in the make side of things. We'll scroll down and you'll see voicemail message here. If you want to leave a voicemail in case these people don't pick up, you can do so here. For this campaign, I won't. We'll have an inbound number on the flip side that'll handle callbacks, and that can be another video. Next, I might actually come back to functions and we'll just enable end call function so that our assistant will end the call when appropriate and not just stay on the line. We'll add an end call phrase, goodbye. That'll do for now. And then we can just publish our assistant. What we'll do now is we'll talk with our assistant to see how it sounds. To do that, we can press talk with assistant. Now this isn't connected to a mobile number yet, so we'll just do a web call. Hello. Hey, how are you? Hi there, I'm doing well, thank you for asking. This is Sam from Talk AI. I have a quick question for you. Have you ever received a call from an AI before? Yes, I have. Okay, that'll do for now. Sounds pretty good to me. Obviously, you guys will have different scripts and variations of what I have here. That will be completely up to you. So my recommendation is continue to keep testing different variations of the script. One script may not work for your purpose, but this is just a general guide to follow. When you're happy with your assistant, the next thing we'll do is actually connect our Twilio phone number to our assistant. Now, if you're not familiar, you can create a Twilio account. You'll be given an account SID and authentication token, and you can buy a mobile number in Twilio for about $6.50 a month or a landline at half that cost. So get that all sorted out, and then you can head over to phone numbers on the left-hand side here. And this will bring you to a screen like this. To import your phone number, hit import, and you'll have a Twilio phone number that you just bought. You'll enter the number here, your account SID, authentication token, and you can name it. You'll hit import from Twilio, and your phone numbers will pop up here. The main thing you need to know is the phone number ID, which will copy when appropriate. Now that's connected up in Vapi, all we have to do is create some logic on our make server that will start running through our database and sending these calls, and then later analyzing our transcripts and determining the outcome of each call. This is the database we'll be using. It's in Airtable. I have here some scraped leads off the internet. There's about over 300. I'm not sure of the exact number, but we have some important fields or columns that we have set up here. First, the name, the company, the phone number, the email, the status, the called status. So at the moment, they're not called, obviously, because we haven't called them. We'll have the outcome. This is where our qualification outcome will be posted. The sentiment, engagement, and the transcript, along with the recording URL. Now, the most important ones to note here, and the ones we're really using, is the phone number field, the called field, the outcome, and the transcript, as well as the recording URL. So to explain this again, we'll be using the phone number and called fields to make the calls. If the field equals not called, so this column, we'll call that lead and send our call outcome to this outcome field. We'll send also the transcript to this field, and then the recording URL to this field. Now that I've explained that, and your database may look different, but you'll need to collect the phone number and have the relevant columns set up, we'll head over to our make scenario, and we'll connect our assistant and our database together so that we can start to make some calls out to these numbers and then start updating our database with our qualification outcome. Over in a new make scenario, our first module will act as our trigger module, which will be an Airtable search records. Go into apps and you'll locate Airtable. What we're looking for is search records down here. We'll add that, and the first thing we need to do is authenticate with our Airtable so that Make can read and write our database records. To do that, we'll hit add, and the connection type we can do online authentication. We'll hit save, and this will prompt you with a screen to connect your base with your Make account. We'll add those. This will verify your connection, and now we can locate into our table. Under this base, the table is our imported table, and the first thing we can do is sort our records. And what we want to be doing here is sorting by the called status. So this called status, we want to sort not called. It'll return all the not called records so that we can call it. To do that, we'll add sort. The field is going to be our called column, and you can just do descending. The output field we want is obviously the phone number. So check that box, and we'll add a formula to filter through these records. What we'll do is open bracket, open curly bracket, called, close curly bracket, space equals, open single quotes, not called, close single quotes, close bracket. This searches for the called column, and the called column is equal to not called. That'll return all those. Now the limit here is gonna be 10. And this could be 100 or 1,000. However, as many of you know, in my last video, Vapi has a concurrency limit of 10 sequential calls. To combat this, and for the purposes of this video, I'll abide by our concurrency limit, and we'll limit to 10. And what we'll do is we'll run through 10 records every minute. So we can set the interval time here to a minute each interval. So each minute it'll launch 10 calls. This will bypass the concurrency limit, so you're still making 300 calls every half an hour, which is incredible. So we'll hit OK, and that is our first one done. We can run this module just to show you. As you see, we have 10 bundle outputs with those records and their numbers. Exit out of that, and now what we need to do is iterate through each bundle with the phone number and the ID. So first head down to flow control, and we'll look for iterator here. Add an iterator and connect that up. We'll turn off mapping here, and we'll add our first item. The first item is going to be the ID, and we'll add a secondary item with the phone number. Now what we need to do is aggregate. We can add an array aggregator, and our source module is going to be our iterator. And we want to get the total number of bundles, and we're going to aggregate the ID and the phone number together. Now I'll run this again just so you can see. We have 10 nice operations grouped together with the phone number and ID. The next part is to connect to our Vapi assistant and start sending these calls out. Now we can use a few different assistant options here. We can have a transient assistant or a persistent assistant. Bit of a tongue twister there. Because we don't necessarily want to create a new assistant for each call, so that's an example of a transient assistant, we're going to be using a persistent assistant. Now, this ensures that our data, when we look over our Vapi dashboard, isn't skewed, and we'll be using the same assistant for each call that we make. So to do this, we can add our HTTP module. Under HTTP, we'll click make a request. And the first thing we need to do here is add our URL. Now the URL is Vapi's endpoint, a location that we can tap into to use their platform. And the URL to create a phone call is https://api.vapi.ai/call. Now the method here is going to be post as in we're sending data to that endpoint to receive a response, and the data we're sending is going to be the phone number. As with most API requests, we'll have to add an authorization header. We can do that by hitting add a header down here. Click that, and the name is going to be authorization, with the value going to be our Vapi API key, added by typing bearer, followed by your Vapi API key, which to get, we'll head over to the Vapi dashboard, head down to your account in the bottom left under API keys, and you'll see your private API key here. You can copy this to clipboard and we'll paste it into the module. Now, once that's put in there, we'll specify the body type as raw, content type application JSON. And now for the request content, this is where we send our payload to Vapi. And specifically, we want to send a payload request to use our assistant we created along with our phone number. And to do that, we'll open curly bracket and the first thing we need to specify is the assistant ID, and I'll paste these in the description so you can just copy them. I'll quickly put these in. It'll look something like this, so really not much to add here. Some things we have to note here are the assistant ID, as well as the customer number and our phone number ID. And I've put this in here in case you want to be calling them by their name, and this is just a variable that we can specify within our system prompts, but I'm not going to use it. I'll keep it in there just for example. So to grab the assistant ID and our phone number ID, we need to go back over to Vapi, and under phone numbers, like I mentioned before, this will be your phone number ID, so we can copy that, paste it in, as well as our assistant, which we can locate up here, copy assistant ID. So we got our assistant ID, our phone number ID. All we need to do now is put in the number variable from our array aggregator module. As you can see in here, we have an array containing our ID and phone number. We want to be using the phone number. So right now we've just created a sequence to run through our Airtable database, collect the phone number, and then send calls using the assistant we just created, and we'll do 10 a minute. And we're just going to add one more thing, so our Airtable records get updated with the new called status, which will be called. So we'll add another module, and it'll be an Airtable module. All we have to do is look for update a record, locate into our base, then our table, and now we can use the record ID collected from our aggregator here, and then we're just going to be updating our called to our called. This will make it so each time we've called someone, it'll change from not called to called. That way, each time we run this, it's not going to double up on calls. It'll make sure we're only calling the number once. We'll hit OK, and that scenario is pretty much good to go. I'm going to rename this to, and one thing we might add here is an error handler in case any of the numbers don't work for any reason. It won't stop the scenario. It'll keep running and just store incomplete executions. To add an error handler, go down to flow control and hit break. Connect that to the HTTP module. We can leave that for now. If you're using a break module, you'll need to head into scenario settings and allow storing of incomplete executions. Now, like I was saying before, if you don't have an enterprise account with Vapi, you'll only be able to launch 10 calls a minute. To do that, so we're launching 10 a minute, we can click the clock here and we'll run the scenario at regular intervals at 1 minute a piece. Hit OK, and then we can save this, and all we have to do now is create a second scenario that handles post-call analysis. So far, we've created our assistant, connected it to our database, and added a sequence to start distributing calls. One thing to note here, if you're scraping leads and using their number, especially within Australia, there's something called a DNCR, which is a do not call register. So you need to screen your numbers against that register, especially if you're in Australia, so you don't get marked as spamming and your Twilio account will get banned if you get too many reports. So do make sure that the phone numbers you've collected are not on that list. There's a lot of phone numbers on that list, but there's a lot of phone numbers that are not. And this applies not only to B2C, but B2B communication. So one thing to note there. This is our new scenario that will be doing the second half of this automation. And this is really the crux of our sales agent. To explain how this sequence will work, we will first receive our end of call report, which in Vapi contains our call transcript along with some customer data, which will then go through a series of subsequent modules to determine the outcome of our call, and also to extract an email if a user had given one. So remember a while ago when I said we'll come back to the messaging part in Vapi, this is where it all happens. First, we'll create a webhook and a custom webhook here, and we can add our own webhook. We can name it whatever we want. This will give us a unique URL that we'll now use. We'll copy that to the clipboard. We'll now use in our Vapi assistant to specify where to send this report to. So back over in our assistant under advanced, scrolling down to our messaging, where you see server URL, this is the URL Vapi will use to communicate messages via a post request, and we'll paste it in there. Beautiful. Now, one thing we'll do here is the server messages. We need to specify the type of server messages we want to actually receive in our make scenario, and we sort of just want the end of call report. So we can X these other ones and we're good to go. You'll hit publish and that's all good to go. What I'll actually do here is we'll do a web call and we'll receive some data back into this webhook so that you can see. So I'll right click, run this module only, and this will start listening for an end of call report. So I'll talk with the assistant, and when the call is finished, it'll send some data. Hi there, this is Sam from Talk AI. I have a quick question for you. Have you ever received a call from an AI before? No, I haven't actually. That's interesting to hear. As an AI agent myself, I'd love to show you how we can handle cold outreach. I just have 3 quick questions to showcase the improvements of AI. Do you have about 2 minutes to chat? Yeah, go ahead. Great, thank you. Let's start with the first question. How do you handle cold leads today? We manually do cold calling. I understand. Thank you for sharing that. Now for my second question, what's your biggest challenge with manual cold calling? It takes a very long time to get through a large database of leads. I understand that does sound time consuming. For my final question, would automating this process with AI be something you'd consider trying? Definitely. That's great to hear. It's pretty cool, isn't it? I'd like to send over some information about our AI solutions. What's the best email address for you? It's jonas@gmail.com. Thanks for that. Could you please spell that out for me to ensure I have it correctly? Yeah, so it's JONAS@gmail.com. Thank you for spelling that out. I've got it, jonas@gmail.com. Is there anything else you'd like to know about Talk AI's solutions for automating cold outreach? That's all. Thank you for your time. So as you can see, that's how our call sounds. We'll end that call and now we'll have a webhook with the end of call report in our make scenario. As you can see here, it sent it over to our make scenario. You'll see our transcript as a long string. The conversation I just had would be an example of a qualified or hot or warm lead. Now this was a web call, so we're actually not gonna see a phone number here. I'll launch this on a phone number. So to quickly show you again, because the last one was a web call, which you heard, we now have our customer here, which includes our number. What I did there was just run through our scenario and call myself. So now that that is all good, we need to match each end of call report with their respective position in our database. So each time we call a lead and when we receive an end of call report, it needs to match up accordingly with each entry. How do we do that? Well, what we can do now is add a new module, Airtable, and search records. Again, we'll add our connection, locate into our base and find the table, imported table, and we'll be using another formula in this case. And similar to what we did before, we're going to use open brackets, open curly brackets, and this time we're searching in the phone number column. So we can do phone space number. It's very case sensitive, so make sure you're spelling this exactly how your column name is spelt, equals open single quote. And what we're doing here is we're searching by the customer number. There we go. close single quotes and close bracket. All we have to do now is hit OK. Now this will match our end of call report to the respective Airtable record, so we can now add additional data into that record post call, including the outcome now, as well as the transcript and its recording URL. What we need to do now is determine whether a lead's outcome is qualified or unqualified. We also need to collect the email address in its appropriate format, and to do that, we'll head over to OpenAI Playground and create a few assistants, including that transcript analyzer to determine the outcome and the email capture assistant. Over here in the assistants playground, we'll add our first transcript analyzer assistant. So we can call this whatever we want, call it transcript analyzer, and this is our system prompt that will give this assistant the logic it needs to determine the outcome of a call from a transcript. Now, I've already got some prompts ready that I'll paste in now, but I'll explain them to you in a sec. Over here, we have the transcript analyzer. You guys will have a copy of these in the description, so don't worry. Paste that over to the instructions. Now, just to explain what we're doing here, we will be categorizing our leads based on this criteria, determining if a prospect is hot, warm, cold, or unqualified. And this is the description of whether or not a lead is hot, warm, cold, and so forth. You're an expert text analyzer. Your job is to extract a key metric from a given phone conversation transcript. Again, going through the qualification criteria here. And once you have determined the value of the transcript, output only the type of outcome. There's our system prompt. Now, the model we'll be using is GPT-4 Mini, good for lightweight tasks, very token efficient. And the output or our response format of this is going to be a JSON schema. This makes it easier to push the outcome of our assistants to Airtable, and you'll see that in a moment. So the first thing we need to do here is create a schema that determines the model's response format. And basically what we want here is an object of outcome and then a string value. That's it. Again, I've got these schemas already made and we'll paste it in there. We have the name of our schema, phone conversation metrics, and the property we're collecting here is an outcome and it's a string value. This is required. We'll hit save. All we have to do now is create our email formatter and it'll be the exact same. I'll quickly create that. We've got that here. Again, you guys have a copy over here. So very efficient for you guys. I'll explain it. We just give some instructions here on how to determine the appropriate email format if it's explained over the phone. A bunch of stuff here that we won't go into. I just know this works quite well. Essentially what this does is if a user has given their email, it'll format it nicely so it'll be inputted into our Airtable email column. Now that we have our two OpenAI assistants, we can run the transcripts through both of them and extract our lead outcome as well as an email if applicable. And we'll select the assistants we just created. To do that, we'll add another module. OpenAI is what we're looking for. And we're looking for message and assistant. Hit that and you'll connect up to your OpenAI. This will bring up a screen like this, and all we have to do is select the assistants we just created. Firstly, we have our transcript analyzer, the one we created, and the role we're going to specify as the user. And the message here is going to be the transcript. Scroll down and we're looking for the transcript here. And that is all good to go. We'll do the same for, I'll just rename these. We'll do the same for the email. Transcript here, hit OK. Just rename this. Boom, there you go. So now what's happening is our end of call report, which contains our transcript, is being sent to this server. We're matching it up with the Airtable record. We're passing the transcript through our assistant 1 module and then the assistant 2 module. All we have to do now is pass our responses. Now, this is how our response looks. So for example, the email here, if I run this, you'll see what I mean by this. There you go. See, it passes the email format in a nice little array here that we can then use. So we have to pass this JSON so we can grab the string value and put it directly into Airtable. To do that, hit add another module, search JSON, pass JSON, and the JSON string we'll get from the first module is the transcript, add result, and then we'll do another one, pass JSON for our second one, the email, result there. Or it's probably better to go through and look in the proper nested text value here. Content text value, it's probably better to do that in case the result array is empty. Sometimes it may mess up. So go through the proper nesting and add there. All we have to do is now update our record with these new values and we are good to go. So we hit add another module, Airtable, update a record, locate our base as we've been doing, and the record ID we conveniently collected at the start, we'll input that there. Over here, we'll have to add the outcome, which will be the JSON passed module, as well as the transcript, which we can add down here. Okay, there. And then the email that will be collected. What I'll do now is I'll just run these modules so you can see the output of what it looks like. I'll just use it in the playground. So as you can see, that's the email format. So if I were to run that module only, that's what we'll be getting. You'll see it contains our email. I'll do the same for the JSON just to speed things up a little. That's what our transcript would look like. It will determine the outcome. Now, what you guys might want to do is call yourself up and have this module run through. But what you'll do is we'll update a record now with those values. Now we're updating the email with our past email response, as well as the outcome with our past outcome response. And then the transcript, outbound, as well as our recording URL. And there you go. And we are good to go. I'm just gonna clean this up a bit. I'll add some error handlers on each of the modules so that the scenario won't stop each time you run it. And then from now, we'll launch the campaign. I actually did it yesterday using the same setup. So don't worry, I will show you the logs and the outcome of an AI sales agent built from the ground up. All I added here, I renamed our modules and our scenario and a call report into matching our ID, the transcript analysis, email capture, the outcome of both, updating our Airtable record, and then I added some error handlers for each module in case something breaks along the way because we're launching a lot of calls. This may happen. So this will just prevent the scenario from not continuing to run. And then on the flip side of that, we have our outbound campaign here, the main sort of module. And what we'll do now is I'll run through this. I'll cut to this scenario running and then our Airtable. As you can see, I've just filtered here by the called status. All these leads have been called and we have our outcomes here along with the transcript, and some emails were captured along with the transcript. And then we've got our, I don't want to expose emails here because this was a live campaign, but we have the emails captured for those that were warm. But as you can see, this was the conversation we're having. Few quick questions. Have you ever received an AI call? Now, some of these outcomes that are blank are because the line was busy, so the call actually didn't get connected. But generally, we have a lot of outcome data here. So in total, we had about 336 something calls with 85 answered. And then of those 85, we had 6 qualified, which is very, very impressive. Usually for like cold calls like this, it's anywhere from 2 to 6%, and 6 qualified calls out of those 85 answered puts us at 7%. So really impressive there. And I'll jump into the analytics and the outcome of this campaign in a second. But as you can see here, all the outcomes were recorded. A lot of these, as you can see, the warm essentially means qualified. So hot and warm were qualified, cold and unqualified, obviously just that. That's actually a funny conversation, but we won't go into that. But as you can see, we had some tagged as warm, and without giving too much information away here, we had a long conversation with this one. We had a lot of conversations here, so really good data. A few marked potential, so we had 2 potential leads, I believe, and then the rest, so 77 unqualified. I'm gonna jump over to the results on a different screen, but before I do that, I'll show you the runs. So analysis side of things, we have, you can see, a lot of runs here. So a lot of conversations recorded and analyzed post call, literally hundreds here. The one we created earlier, so extremely efficient really. So 30 minutes making 336 outbound calls. I'll jump over to the analytics now and we'll wrap up to show the results. So here we have it. In this run, we had 336 dials with 111 going straight to voicemail and 85 answered. So we're not counting those that hung up immediately. So 85 actually answered and conversed with our bot. What does this mean in terms of qualification percentage? Now, being a strict cold call, we expect 2 to 6% for a human sales staff. But what we actually saw here was a 7% qualification rate for our AI agent, which is mind-blowing. We had another 2 potential leads with the rest either cold or unqualified. Now, looking at this pie chart, it does seem like a lot's unqualified and a lot is, but we got to understand the cost and efficiency as well as the outcome here. Now, again, I'm just going to drive that point home where a straight cold call by a human expects a 2 to 6% qualification rate. We beat that by 1% using pretty much a robot, which is crazy. We were able to do 10 calls a minute. So in 30 minutes or so, we had 336 calls. That efficiency is 8 to 10 times that of a human. So extremely incredible. This is real results on what we saw with that campaign to prove that this is an extremely powerful tactic. And you don't even have to pick up the phone. You sit back, let it run in the background, and start following up and booking in meetings of those emails you collected. So we know for 300 calls, we'll have about 6 qualified leads that have given emails and are marked as hot or warm leads that we can follow in and book in calls. We're actually actively doing that as we speak. This was a campaign we ran and we've already booked in a few meetings based on these calls. It's really quite incredible, the future of AI and what it can do for your sales process. Think of a human making 333 calls. It would take 1 to 2 days. That's 1 to 2 days of labor. And if you're talking minimum wage, in Australia, it's $24 an hour times 8. So that's like $190 something a day. If you're just ripping phone calls all day for 8 hours, times that by 2, we're looking at almost $400 in labor for a human to do that with an expected 2 to 6% qualification rate. Now, I understand that some humans are gone and you can't replace that just yet. But for your everyday sales staff that you're spending money on with labor, this beats it 100%, and the data's here to show that. If we compare the costs, and costs may differ, but raw running costs, we're looking at 10 to 20% of the cost compared to a human using AI. So huge cost savings and huge efficiency increases. And the quality evidently is there also. So crazy results here, guys, and I hope you were able to follow along and build your own one of these. It's very cool to see this actually working and running. Again, you need to be careful of the do not call register list if you're in Australia, and also abiding by the telemarketing laws in Australia. Leave a comment below if you guys managed to try this out yourself. I'd be curious to see what industries and leads you've taken it to and what results you were able to see in those domains. I would love to know, so please leave a comment. Also leave a comment in what you think the future of AI in sales is going to look like. We know that AI is still evolving, so these results so far are only going to get better and better. So it's really exciting to see what this will look like in 3 months down the line, or 6 months down the lines, or even a few years down the line. So being early right now is a really exciting place to be in. Again, if you're a business owner looking to do something like this for your outbound communications, please check the link below and you can get in touch with myself and we can work together. Like this video if you enjoyed. It lets me know if I'm doing the right content or not and people in the community like it. Again, subscribe if you want to stay ahead of the AI curve. I'm constantly doing these little experiments and building new things in the domain of voice AI and AI in general. So please subscribe to me. It means the world. I love doing these videos and I want to continue doing that. But that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed. Until next week.